Microphone check, 1, 2, what is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service.
Here we are again at the end of a rainbow.
I heard recently that experts say we as a society are in what they call a general crisis, meaning that we are not just dealing with economic crises, ecological crises, political crises, but many types of crises occurring all at the very same time. So needless to say, music that speaks to the emotional and mental ramifications of living in times like this has really connected with me in recent years, and I think it's connected with the general population more than it ever has. And I think artists have responded accordingly, as I keep finding myself saying, oh, this is the most personal record yet from XYZ artist. It's a theme and it makes perfect sense. And today's guest touches on these topics in a powerful way. That is Oakland's Nappy Nina, a rising star who blends thoughtful and empathetic subject matter with raps that truly defy the conventional, exuding a level of cool and calm that embodies the long lineage of smooth West Coast rap greats that preceded her, and a technical ability that brings this buttery soft delivery to new and exciting places, allowing her to get into some danceable rap grooves on 2021's collaborative album with JWords, Double Down, as well as getting to a soulful, vibrant, also dancey and jazzy sounding Mourning Due, the upcoming release from Nappy Nina, slated to drop February 17th. Listen on to hear about her unique artistic background, her general approach to writing, as well as getting a sneak peek into what this new album, Mourning Due, actually sounds like from the creator themselves. And then at the very end of the episode, you'll get to hear one of my favorite tracks on this entire album, Cope. You'll get to hear a nice little snippet of it. I know you'll enjoy it. The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth album and song reviews, as well as artist interviews and general rap commentary sprinkled in between on all of what the mainstream and underground rap scenes have to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. Nappy Nina, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, feeling good. It's early in Oakland, but I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, really happy to have you on. You've had a really nice career, but recently I feel like a lot of people I keep hearing are like, oh, yo, you heard of Nappy Nina? If you heard of Nappy Nina, you should have her on the show. I'm like, yeah, I know. I had your name listed in my little notepad of guests. I've been wanting to find the right time, and you had a record out. I'm like, coming out. I'm like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
One thing I really want to start with is I understand that you got your kind of start in terms of like arts and all of that in terms of poetry at a very early age. That was something you really loved. What sparked your love of writing, and how did this eventually transition into wanting to rap?
I feel like initially it wasn't even a love at first, try thing. It was more like my parents were trying to find something to do with me after school because I was like, just not having anything to do, not doing anything good with my time. So they asked me to go to some workshops that were being held around the city, and I just kind of fell in love with the rhythm of I always loved writing, but I just kind of fell in love with the rhythm of poetry at that time, especially that was very specific, like performance poetry, and I feel like it led to rap because I was always kind of trying to rap in the poetry slams and stuff. Like my poems would just be a little bit more rhythmic, a little bit, more rap style, a cappella, or whatever. And I feel like I wasn't doing good in the slams. I wasn't winning and I felt really competitive about it. And at the same time, I was listening to a whole bunch of amazing hip hop at that time. That was high school, So I think that just I was just like, oh, like I actually really love hip hop. Like I feel like I can do this from just like the writing I've done as a poet.
And what were some of the what were some of like the main kind of reasons you feel like you weren't winning these competitions? Were you just that you really didn't really want to do spoken word or whatever poetry slams? You wanted to really rap, so it didn't fit?
It wasn't even that. I feel like I really wanted to win. Like I just one, I still struggle to this day with memorization. Like my performance, I feel like I didn't understand the performance aspect as well as I do now.
Mm.
And I was just really stuck on like what I was saying, and I wasn't as good as like getting people to care about it, you know?
Yeah, no, I find it's interesting. I was actually at a show yesterday. It's I'm not sure if you're familiar with any of these folks, but Raz Fresco, he's doing good things in Toronto,
Yeah.
and he had like all of his folks from the Bakers Club, his label, and I had listened to all of their music on like their studio records. And I found, although I liked those, whenever they all performed, it was like, oh shit, these guys really know how to perform. Like, and
Yeah.
I find the inverse is sometimes true where sometimes it's people either like don't know how to bring that same kind of energy or charisma to like the studio record, and then sometimes people don't know how to bring those subtleties that made people love the studio record in person, like live. It's
Yeah, it's
interesting.
really hard to get both of those things down, I feel like.
Yeah. And I also read in a previous interview that you had a desire, and I think you still do, to do writing for movies and TV, which I found that was cool. What's different writing in that medium versus rap that like inspires you or wants you to makes you want to pursue it eventually?
I feel like there's a lot of similarities, you know. I feel like my rap style, I write a lot from like what I just see on the daily, and I want I want to bring that to the screen. I think I just like the medium of film and TV, and I just like want to use what I've learned like to make something like actually tangible, differently tangible, you know, just like I feel like it's harder to convince people to listen to music than to watch something. Um, I don't know, in my
Hmm.
perspective. I mean, I feel like I know a lot of people who are just like, you're like, oh, have you watched this show? Have you watched this movie? They'll instantly watch it. Or, but when you're like, yo, have you heard this record by like this, you know, person? They're like, oh, like, yeah, I'm gonna check it out. And you check back in like six
Yeah,
months later, they still haven't.
that's
But
interesting. I don't know. I
yeah,
actually I may believe you on that. Yeah.
I don't know how true it is, but I feel like that's from my perspective.
I think
Um,
TV and movies are definitely more of like a conversation thing. Like I feel like
yeah,
there's a huge sect of people. Like I don't feel like I'm included. I doubt you are. It sounds like you're really into the art, but like there's a lot of casual like movie cinema people that just kind of like watching stuff to keep up with like what's the
yeah,
new thing. Like, oh, did you watch White Lotus? Like I don't know, everybody's talking about it. Like I'll watch it. Like it's and that's fine. It's just like yeah, it's not the same with music to the same extent. You're like
yeah. I
maybe
mean, it does
Beyonce album,
happen.
that's like an exception, but you know.
Yeah, or like Lil Yachty. I've been hearing everybody talk about this new Lil Yachty
Oh
record.
my God, yeah, everybody's talking. Someone tweeted it's like it's Pink Floyd. I'm like that made me listen to it just like one song, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. Didn't listen to it much, but it's
Yeah.
funny. What would you say is like the if you had to choose like your favorite written TV show or favorite movie like that was written like that you think is like your favorite? Which would it be?
I have so many favorites, but these questions are always hard. But I feel like I just need to go with the first thing that comes to mind. I really loved The Leftovers, which was on HBO a while back.
I actually haven't seen that. What's that
It's kind
about?
of like a the premise is like all these people disappear off of Earth, and then you some people are left there, and you're trying to figure out what happened. It's a pretty weird show in the later
Okay.
seasons, but I just feel like I really love the style and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the plot and stuff.
Okay, so moving to like the music side of things now. So you one thing I really love about your music is that you clearly have a very eclectic taste in music, like in terms of the kind of funky or jazzy, soulful, and sometimes dancey, quite experimental beats that you've rapped over throughout the years. What do you
Yeah.
look for in an instrumental when you're deciding to pick some tunes for your projects?
I guess I don't know, just has to sound it has to be intriguing to me. Like a lot of the times it depends on what type of mood I am in. Like a lot of producers who I work with know that I love just like piano beats. I love piano. I think, the keys just drive a lot of stuff. But like the more experimental beats, I just look for like pockets that I feel like are unique to fit in. And crazy drums. Like I love the drums that just are like you don't really get it the first time. Like you have to listen to it to a few times through to be like, oh, I understand what the drummer was doing here or whatever, or the producer was doing here. I feel like I look for beats that are just they kind of just drive themselves to like change a lot, or like I can change the flow in
Mm-hmm.
the song a lot.
Yeah, I think there's like a really cool kind of mix of like electronic a lot of times, but also jazzy. Like I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of producers right now that are in that space right now. Like I'm and because some of like we'll get to your the upcoming album soon, but there's a lot of beats that remind me of things that I've heard from a collaborator on the record, Mavi. So it's
Yeah.
that's where it's like some of the kind of beats from people like all the names are blanking right now, but people that produced on that album, I was like, I was gonna ask you who the producers are because I'm like that. I bet there might be some crossover, but that's cool. And speaking of kind of like the production, specifically the danceable stuff you've rapped over, you have a really great project with JWords out from 2021, Double Down. That's like I'd say that's one of the most like recommended albums I've given out to people, especially people that are not like necessarily like the biggest hip hop heads, but I know just like and appreciate real good music. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is I know you haven't heard this because it's like I can guarantee it. It's nice when you can tell someone like, oh, I know you haven't heard something like this. Just
Yeah, I love that feeling.
yeah, it's again, it's like it's a little, it's not that long too. It's not a big commitment. It's like, oh, just play this, not even 20 minutes. And I imagine the kind of like really high BPM, really unconventional production must have like pushed you out of your comfort zone like because you're rapping like as fast as you've ever have and pretty
Yeah.
odd pockets. Like, could you say more about the experience creating Double Down with JWords and like how that may have helped you improve as a rapper?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, like JWords is incredible. She always makes beats. Like I've joked with her all the time because you step into her studio and it's just like a whole bunch of stuff that I'm like, I have no idea how this stuff works, like chords and like
Yeah, she's a
buttons. And I'm like,
gearhead. Yeah.
yeah, she's a gearhead. So, you go in the studio and she's like, oh, here's this beat. And the project started because she put a beat on Twitter and I was like, yo, I need this. And I just rapped over it immediately on Twitter and like reposted it. And she was like, yo, let's do a record. It wasn't even in my mind at the time. And the beats that she was giving me, like you just said, lent themselves to like me rapping incredibly fast. And especially on the song Scared, like that was probably the fastest I've ever rapped. And that was super challenging. Like I had to hype myself up to even record that. But also it was just super fun. Like I loved it. I love the Jersey sound that's in there. I love just like trying to do something new for myself. Like you said, just to just challenge like the way that I could flow. And I did imagine like people moving to the music in a different way than they normally do. Because I feel like I normally make a lot of headphone rap, a lot of,
Mm.
head nod, introspective on the train, looking out the window rap, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, oh, let me just try to do this other thing. And JWords was hype about it, that's her favorite shit. So it just it came together super organically. And I love that project. Like I'm super thankful that we made that.
Yeah, and I think if I'm not mistaken, in like the Bandcamp description, you kind of described it as like having it because this was like pretty peak pandemic at the time when it
Yeah,
came out. Like it was like you want to make a dance floor and like wherever the listener is seated at, and I think you definitely
exactly.
achieved that.
Really
It really
appreciate
gets the
that.
point across like real quick, real quick.
Thank you.
And I find that you have a very beautifully like quiet, breathy voice. It's very inviting. That's the
Mhm.
kind of the initial thing. Can't really tell you exactly the first exact verse I've heard you on. Might it I don't think it was Innocent Country, might have
Mm,
been, but like possibly. But I think you have a special skill in that you have this ability to be like obviously like it's quite like calming, like it hits that kind of tone, but it can be very commanding and like you can still be very passionate, serious as well, but you don't even need to like raise your voice necessarily.
mm,
It's just really unique. Not a lot of rappers can kind of like hold your attention without
Mm.
doing some bullshit, like not bullshit, but like doing some extra stuff. When did you feel comfortable embracing this kind of style? Because it's really different. Like I truly don't know if I've like heard much like this, and I just imagine it might have been you might have been like, damn, like is this too weird? Is this kind of whack? Like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, one, that whole sound and style I feel like is just heavily influenced by where I'm from. I'm from Oakland. Like
Mm.
we're level we're here. We're at a five at all times. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like
yeah.
we don't really need to scream. And I think I had a mentor, Dennis Kim, back in the day, who like he never spoke louder than like you know what I'm saying? Like you had to listen to him. And I think there's a lot of power in that where like you command people to like be silent and or not even be silent, but be intentional with like listening to you. And I think that's something that like consciously and also subconsciously I try to do. Yeah, I always felt like my style wasn't like I couldn't attach it to anything else that was out there, which made me feel like is this good? Like is this actually good? And I still feel like that all the time. So I'm just like until other people listen to it and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is good." Like I am convinced that it's like not good or like not maybe not good, but like yeah, a little weird or like not weird enough or
Mm.
like just in a place that I feel like I had to kind of just be comfortable and confident with being okay in my own lane or whatever. Or like, I'm clearly not in my own lane. There's like similar artists to me,
Hmm.
but I just feel like it took a lot of time to be like, yeah, it's okay to put out music that sounds like this and like be confident about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always also I find like I imagine it must be pretty different or pretty unique being in the space that you're in where I wouldn't say like people would say like you're an quote unquote experimental rapper, but you're like adjacent to that to where like I
Yeah.
find all those all those artists that are in that space, I find they have a pretty hard position. They're in a pretty hard position because their fans are like expecting some sort of similarity because all fans like kind of want the same, like they kind of do have something that they don't
Yeah,
want to change, but then
exactly.
you're experimental, so it's like, yo, this sounds like your last album. I find
Yeah.
that shit's hard, man. Like that's such a I don't even know it's an impossible expectation, but like we all have it. Like I have that, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Or I
With
feel like sometimes when I'm labeled as experimental and I'm like, dope, like, cool, I'm like, rapping over these experimental beats. But then when I do something that's like a little bit more straightforward, I'm like
yeah.
worried that they're going to be like, oh, like this shit is pop. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's like,
what
oh, you
is
sold
this?
out. Like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find your poetry background made your style feel like helped you kind of build out this style a bit more? Because the thing I caught from what you said before was like you felt like you got the rhythm of the poetry like really helped you. And I can really hear that, especially when you are like rapping a little more unconventionally on like Double Down, for example. Like it is just like very much like you're just like snaking your way through the beats, like in a very like I guess I didn't think of poetry at the time, but I can see that now. And I feel like the a cappella training is quite important there.
Yeah, that definitely helped a million times. With a poem, you make it work. You make the cadence work, whatever it is. Like you make the words work to like how, there's no beat. So you just do
Hmm.
what fits. And I feel like I do that with a beat. I'm just always like, oh, I want to say this thing. Let me make it fit here. I kind of, I'm not like, oh, like, here's the space that I can fit in. Let me try to put words there. I'm just like, what are the words I want to put in this space or whatever.
And you kind of mentioned a few an influence earlier. Like, what are some other kind of key influences for you along your way that inspired you?
I mean, people and things like I'm really inspired just by like space and like landscape and um the city, like being in Brooklyn and just like solo. I'm really inspired by like solo dolo missions, like walking around cities and just like exploring them myself, and like people watching. Um, but like people influences, I'm influenced by like all the writers I grew up around, which is a super long list. But like music wise, Fuji's, I mentioned them a lot of times in interviews. One of the first hip hop groups I really, really started listening to, and Missy, and um, a lot of West Coast rap, like Dom Kennedy, Larry
Mm.
June, like a whole bunch of people who just are strictly about flow. They don't even really rap. They just like talk. You know,
Yeah,
I love that.
I could definitely hear like the Larry June, Dom Kennedy, because that's what I love about your music too. It is truly is like hits that like, oh, this is so I'm so chill. I'm just
Yeah.
like waving, like chilling out. It's nice. I'm glad you said Missy too, because
Yeah, I
that's
love it.
someone I think I hear because not only does like did Missy have like a huge like history of having like very eccentric genre bending, whatever you want to call it, like production choices, but obviously she was like a fucking superstar, so she had crazy songwriting. Like, and I think something
Hmm.
that I've grown to love about your music is that you really know how to write hooks. Like, there's always like some sticky hook that's like still quite like you wrote it. It wasn't just some usually very repetitive, like basic, but they always hit, and that's something Missy obviously was great at too. So like I can see that.
Yeah, I want to work with Missy so bad.
Yeah, she's. I think
Yeah.
she's still making music.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think.
sure she's
Yeah,
still working on stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So speaking of like your people watching and kind of those solo dolo missions, it kind of leads to the next thing I want to talk about, which is that it sounds like you're very introspective. I think that's a good assumption to make. So like self-doubt, like therapy, mental health are all kind of big parts of your lyrical content so far
Hmm.
in your career. So I'm curious, like how does making music play into your overall kind of like mental health management? Like, is that like a way for you to kind of have some like therapy in a way, like self help, self understanding?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like making music is similar to just like training muscles or just like working out in a way where like I can get out of my head. Even though I do rap about really introspective stuff, it's a way for me to actually get out of my head and put what's going on paper, which makes it more of a reality, which like makes me confirm that I'm not going crazy. So yeah, I think it's a huge part of just staying okay. I feel like there's a lot of moments where I actually don't make music and I'm like wondering, like things are feeling crazy or I'm feeling like super anxious and I'm wondering what that's about. And then like I do make some music and I feel better. I feel like validated and seen and all that stuff.
I feel like it's probably similar to the kind of reasons why people are told like, hey, journaling might help. I think it's like
Yeah,
a process emotions, put it on paper, like get a release. Kind of
exactly.
like not, yeah, it's not in your head anymore. It's just there. You can look at it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, a patron of the show actually from Ireland, name I'm gonna say his name right, Kian. Kian.
Cool.
He had an interesting question related to this topic that I wanted to share. So
Cool.
he says, like, as someone who's written about her struggles with mental health, I'm wondering how you maintain strength in your kind of like DIY approach to promotion, touring, record pressing, etc. when things get tough. Like and he says, like, I find any ability I have to self promote completely disappears and creative blocks come when my mental health is not right. So how do you manage all of this?
Yeah, self-promotion is hella hard. I hate it. Like it's really hard to just keep being like, yo, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. And I get angry, like I feel like we all get angry about it, but like sometimes I'm like, yo, like why aren't people seeing this? Like I know this shit is dope. I feel like yes, when I'm not in the mental space to do that, I do take breaks and I do take time off. I feel like ultimately my career is only as good as like I am like
Mm-hmm.
mentally. So that shit all comes second to like making sure I'm feeling okay. But also I have a little team, like who are the homies who like Lucid.Haus. Like I feel like it's it's really nice to have homies around who are just checking on you as a person and like checking on how you're doing first and then like checking on your artistry, like making sure that shit gets done. So it's a hard balance, but I feel like I have a good support system.
That's dope. That's dope. Yeah, it seems like there's a good sense of community around like the artists that you're running with these days.
Yeah.
That's really nice to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, yeah.
And like, in the past few years, obviously like the big elephant in the room has been like the pandemic. Like how did these past few years like influence what you wrote about? Did it change? I mean, you definitely have already been rapping about these kind of topics before.
Yeah.
So, but like did it have any kind of did it make you go deeper? Or did it just kind of make it things more pronounced? Like did it have any real effect on you? terms of the
I think it
music?
definitely had an effect. It gave me time, like, if, especially initially, like when the pandemic first started, it gave me time to just like really sit with myself and think about this stuff because I feel like when I was rapping before, it was always in between like a part-time job or like a
Mm,
full-time job or like school. I was in school, night school for mad long. And it was always like these little moments of like, yo, I'm gonna get this in, I'm gonna get this in. But when the pandemic really started and I wrote 30 bag like the first few weeks, I really had a chance to just really sit down and think about stuff. I feel like it gave me time and it gave me space. It also gave me a lot of I was uncomfortable as everybody else was uncomfortable. I didn't know how I was gonna make money. I was
hmm.
about to go on tour, like my first time. I was gonna go do some shows in Russia and I was super hyped.
Yeah,
And all that got canceled and it felt
yeah,
like I was taking a few steps back in my career because I felt like I was really on a little momentum right before,
yeah.
but also it played out exactly how it should. I mean, I feel good about where I'm at now, so
That's good. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah,
yeah.
I noticed generally a trend since 2020 of like more and more often than not, artists were pushing the introspection card a lot more, and it sounded genuine. It sounded like a real
Yeah.
trend. It just seemed like everybody was in that space a bit more than they normally have. Even artists that don't really touch on those topics like as much.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, because like the world was like quote unquote ending a little bit
yeah,
faster than it normally feels like it's ending. So I feel like
yeah.
in those moments you think about life a lot more, just in
Yeah,
general.
I felt like I had a lot of thoughts about all these records when I was like reviewing them or thinking about them in those years. And these years, it's just been like, oh, their most personal record yet. But it's like I kept thinking of that. I'm like, it actually is. It always tended to be. Um, but speaking of records, okay, I want to get into your new album, Mourning Due. I
Right.
love this record. Thank you for giving me an early sneak peek at it.
Yeah.
I really like how like vibrant and like dynamic the sound is, and
Mm.
obviously like your lyricism is as personal and kind of clear as it always is. So this is dropping February 17th, and
Hmm.
since this is like this recording's happening prior to the release of the record, could you give people like a taste of what to expect from the album? What will the listening experience be like?
Like you said, like it's kind of all over the place. I feel like the beats, the record is about mourning in a way, as it says. It's about like loss, but also just feeling like using grief as like currency and like thinking about like who is owed what and where we pay these prices to and just like there's a lot of moments on the record where I reflect on like I feel like it's similar to things I've written before, but I feel like I'm talking a lot about just feeling like getting what is owed and like also giving what is owed. But sound wise, you can expect like all my favorites on there, as always. A lot of JWords production, a lot of Dane Zone production, Nelson Bandela, all the guys are people I've been
Mm-hmm.
working with for mad long, and the homies. And you can just expect like a lot of the same shit you've been getting from me, but also I think it's good. Like I didn't think it was good 2 weeks ago, and I've been listening nonstop, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. I love it. I love it. So,
Could you elaborate on that thought? I found that interesting. Like you're using grief as currency, like getting what is owed, giving what is owed. Like how like could you expand on what you mean by that?
yeah, I feel like I mean, I hate to keep bringing it back to the pandemic because, I feel like we just talk about it so much, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we lost in general as like people, we lost so much, but also on a personal level, so many people around me have just been mourning so many different things. Whether it's like actual people who have passed or like relationships that are no longer present, like whether that be romantic or friendships or parental relationships or like whatever, or like we're just like mourning a sense of somewhat normalcy. Like we're just mourning so many things. And I just wonder, um, like when that does that get to be up when we've like grieved enough? Like, do we get to move on from like feeling sad and sorry when like enough grieving has happened? And how do we like even show that we've grieved enough? Does that look like, what I'm saying, like Black folks like being over like mourning, like unfair treatment? Like, does that mean
Mm-hmm.
like there's so many questions I have in my mind where I'm just like, when do we actually like stop, like get to stop mourning and like get to just like genuinely be happy instead of convincing ourselves to like just be happy and just to move through the motions of like every day.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, I think you captured that. That's interesting. Yeah, like that whole idea, like mourning. Yeah, it seems like there's just a lot, obviously, to be mourning these days, and it
Yeah.
gets to the point where you're like, what's next? Like, how does this
Yeah.
resolve? Like, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it does it
Uh,
resolve. I mean, that being said, like it's not like a super sad record. There's like a whole bunch of bouncy up like
yeah,
songs on it too, you know. So
yeah. I feel like this is like your the most like complete body of work I think you put out because like it definitely is like pretty melancholy, but
mhm.
it's also pretty sobering and like clear-headed, especially like a track like Cope. Like
Mhm.
that might be maybe your best song I've heard from you. Like that one was like
Wow, thank you.
I
I
I, I
did
don't
just
who
say it was
produced
the
that
focus
one?
track. Dane's own.
Oh,
Yeah.
because like the strings. Oh my God, that was
Oh
like I was like
yeah. Well,
whoa
okay,
like
yeah. I have to actually shout out the violin player, Maya Bernardo.
oh
She's
that's live.
that's live. Yeah, she's
Oh
super filthy. So I have to say that. She killed it.
yeah, that one really added like a touch of like just heaviness. I was like oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
But yeah, I feel like this album isn't like it is somewhat like kind of like uplifting too. It doesn't like leave me in a darkness and then just like keeps me there. Like you definitely bring me around, but it doesn't end like that, which I like.
Yeah.
There is some resolve, I guess you could say, to this morning, not like maybe
Yeah.
reality, which is good. The feature list on this is fucking insane. It is
Yeah.
insane. Like I didn't
Mm.
like I didn't expect I didn't even maybe I don't know if you've even shared a lot of this publicly, so I wasn't sure what to
I only
expect.
tweeted about it like one time.
Okay, because I missed that, and then I just was listening to. I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? So you have, for people who aren't aware, you have Moor Mother, you have Cavalier, you have Messiah, you have Mavi, you have Stas the Boss, like you have, and then more, and then
And
you have
Logi,
producers.
who I
Yeah,
love.
Logi, yeah,
Yeah.
man, you have. It's like that's wild. And so, how does it feel as an artist to get guest features from peers that I'm sure you respect and admire dearly? Like, do you feel it inspires you to push your game up another notch?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it makes me feel really respected and loved also. Like, I mean, all these people who are asked to be on the project are homies, you know. Whether or not like I've been knowing them for a while, or I feel like Logi is probably the person I met most recently. But like I love his music and I
Hmm.
feel like there's just like a mutual respect there, which makes me feel really good between all of us, you know. And definitely it makes me want to rap better. Like Cavalier is one of my favorite rappers from a long time. I've been listening to Cavalier for mad long. So like to get him on this record was really special to me. And you know, that goes with everybody who's on the record. Like it's always I always feel super privileged to like continue to have JWords on my records, or to continue to have Nelson Mandela, continue to have Dane Zone, continue to have Masai. Masai been on every single record that I've had, you
Yeah.
know,
And I
Stas
would
the
love that
Boss.
to continue. Yeah.
Like I feel so lucky. Like, and I know it sounds like corny and cheesy, but I'm just like, dang, like I get to make this super dope thing with like these super dope people who I love and respect. More Mother, you know, I love More Mother. We've known each other for mad long, and it's dope to see each other grow just like in our different ways. And just to be able to be like in 5 years, like, yo, like remember when we all did this? Like that.
Hmm. Yeah, and you also have features from people like that don't give them out like easy too, which is like Mavi. I don't even really remember the last time like I heard him on a feature. Like he doesn't
Yeah.
do that often. Like
Yeah, I
More
love
Mother
Mavi.
definitely doesn't do that often. Like
Yeah.
Cavalier, like he's practically like it's cool to see him like I know he has an album eventually coming out. Like
Yeah.
there's talks with like obviously the Quelle EP they dropped, but like he's been a little more active. I mean, he was like ghost for a while, like publicly at least. So that's
True.
crazy. And I think the song you guys did was one of my favorites on the record. Same with I mean, say like there's so many good songs on this album.
Thank you. Yeah, Mavi, I want to say I love Mavi, and I think that was, you know, that feature was really just off the strength of love. Like it was nothing more than like I just reached out to him, was like, yo, we know each other. I know his sister, but like even outside of that, he was just like, yeah, I would love to get on this, you know. And I was like, I would love to have you. It was just a really good feeling of just like both of us want to rap, and love the production. So
And you guys have like a very mutual, I think, like a mutual kind of perspective on a lot of things. Like
yeah,
the connection makes perfect sense. You guys both really put your heart into your music.
thank you.
Um, another aspect of this album that's notable is that it's released under Lucid.Haus.
Hmm.
And so for those that aren't aware, it's like artist owned, operated label that you are a co-creator of.
Yeah.
So could you tell me how you first linked up like with the other folks that like created the label and like why you feel a label like this, artist run, is important in a industry like we are in today?
Yeah, well, Lucid.Haus started a lot. I mean, people know but don't know. My brother, it's me and my brother. We started it. Teo Mode. He's a part of a band called Baby Fang. And it started with like us just wanting to put my own records out by myself because it was just hard to initially it was hard to get attention of like other labels. And then when we did start getting the attention of other labels, the deals were so whack and like everything was just so we were just like, but how do we make money? Like how do we feel supported in these ways? And they
Mm-hmm.
never came back with good answers. So I feel like we were just like, yeah, like let's just do this ourselves. And then from there we got other artists like Stasty Boss, Canteen Killer, 13th Law, and my homie, like best friend and manager, Ryan Holmes, and we just all were like this is it. This is a team. We're just gonna rock and push each other's stuff. And we just been becoming more and more legit every year. So I just feel like if you can't afford to, and I know that I come from like a privileged place of having homies who are down in with like similar mindsets. But if you
Mm-hmm.
can afford to, I feel like it's really beneficial to just do it yourself because you just have so much say at the end of the day. You don't have to feel like you are owing anything to anybody but yourself and like other peers. And you have less of a chance of getting taken advantage of, I feel like.
Yeah, which is
The main
very
thing.
important
Yeah,
nowadays.
super important.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's really that's something like when I first kind of heard about that, I was very intrigued because I'm not obviously there are others that exist. Obviously, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna be dumb, but I don't know of many in rap that I can that come to mind. And I was like, that was very, really cool.
Yeah.
Especially because like for better or for worse, there's a lot of talk about like record contracts and like all like the skeevy gross stuff that happened in the industry. So I think
Yeah.
like you're definitely like operating in a very alternative path that could work for a lot of people if they do have like the right resources and people around them to make it happen.
Yeah. And we're definitely not the first ones to do it. It's been done before, but it's just like we I feel like I used to see that I was in similar positions as artists who were signed to bigger labels, and I was just like, what's the difference? You know, what's the difference between me and them? It's like they actually owe money to like a larger thing at the end of the day, and we're here playing like the same shows and like you know what I'm saying, like having the same vinyl, like pressing up the same vinyl, and like we're in similar positions, but it just feels better to know that like I owe money to myself, you know what I'm saying, or like
Hmm.
not to make it all about money, but like you know.
That's not, I don't think, one
Honest
thing
with
that
them.
I feel like a lot of people, a lot of fans, this is really a fan thing of music, I think they get kind of grossly entitled when it comes to like, because you know, like with the vinyl, it's like people like Griselda, like artists like from Griselda, like Mock, like specifically like made that whole like char up like upping the price of their vinyl and shit, and people
Yeah,
get really mad. It's like, okay, like
I respect
well,
it.
we all are aware as soon as you buy that shit, it's going to be up for 200 bucks at Discogs. Like I know Rap
Exactly.
Ferreira, I think he was selling his vinyl like initially for like 150, like he has some out, and it's like yeah, but like all of his vinyl are at least 200 bucks. Like all of like
Yeah,
actually every single one, even records
yeah,
that weren't as acclaimed. So I just find like people get a little gross when they don't realize that people are like needing to live. Like in a perfect
yeah,
world, we're living off that. But I know a lot of people have like part-time jobs or full-time jobs. But um,
exactly. Like I've had part-time
yeah,
hustles the whole time, and yeah, that is something to think about.
yeah, and like if we want good music, we have people have to survive to make good music. So
It's
yeah,
true.
it's always something people should keep in mind. Is there okay? So before we wrap up, like, are there any upcoming things? So obviously, Morning Due, but is there anything else that you'd want to highlight in addition to this record that's on the horizon, projects, merch, anything?
I'm gonna definitely have some cool merch out after this record is out. I'm planning to go on tour. I'm going to Australia next month for a
Oh,
couple
fuck.
shows, so I'm
That's
excited for that.
crazy.
But also, like, I don't know. I'm working on a project. I mean, it probably won't be out this year, but I'm working on an EP with Swarvy that I'm so excited about.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
I love Swarvy.
The
So
Logi
and
connection too. There you
yeah, yeah. I know Swarvy separately of Logi, but like I would just love to make a project, and I loved the project they made together. So we
go.
already
Yeah.
have like a lot of jams together, and it's just about like finalizing and stuff. But that's probably in the future, but that's like definitely in the works. But yeah, like I'm just excited for folks to hear Mourning Due, and just to like play it in as many places as I can, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and you definitely should make like a poster of this guy.
Yeah,
I'm
I definitely
positive,
want to
but
put.
man.
Yeah, I'm having a release show in Brooklyn, and I will have posters.
Yeah, for those that aren't aware, this is a real photo. It's not Photoshop. I definitely thought it was Photoshop, but
Not photoshopped. I was
you
in the
got to
desert.
perform in the Sahara Desert then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Earl, I really thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing insight on like how you approach music and giving a sneak peek to this record. I'm sure people will love it.
Yeah.
And yeah, just wish you all the best. Enjoy Australia and take care.
Thank you so much.
Peace.
Peace.
So there we have it, another episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV. I hope this episode gave you some new perspectives and insights into what the greatest art form known to man in hip-hop music has to offer. If you want to support the show in the most meaningful way possible, it would be my absolute honor to have you as a patron in the new Rap Music Plug podcast Patreon. Through this Patreon, you will be getting exclusive content such as bonus episodes, exclusive album recommendations, exclusive playlists, early access to episodes, and more. And above all, though, you will be able to support the show directly in a way that will not only justify the crazy amount of time I spend on this show already, but allow me to cover some of the expenses related to supporting all of these great artists that we cover on the show through the website, and will allow us to sustain and build on this amazing growth that the RMPP has experienced recently. So if you have any questions about any of the Patreon stuff, or just want to keep tabs on the show, interact with me on rap music and all the great stuff that we can talk about, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rapmusicplugpod, or shoot me an email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify as well. But that's enough self-promotion for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.